So what do we got for the past week in Penn State football recruiting? I know that there was a commitment that you texted me and like, we're not doing a video on this guy. Sorry. And I'm like, that's good because I don't necessarily have 10 minutes on 2027 running backs.
Yeah,
So do we have a
first up,
couple minutes on that now?
first up, an apology to Kemon Spell, running back from McKeesport. He's a 2027. If you watched the show before, these commitments well in advance. Yes, we give them time, but it's it's a long time until he signs. But I tell you what, coming off of a freshman year at McKeesport, he looks really good. He's a really good back, and Penn State has made a habit of finding these guys early. Usually it works out. Messiah Mickens committed at this time last year. Kemon Spell looks to be the next guy up in Pennsylvania. He can move. He came to camp, ran really well. He's got size. I mean, he's about 5'10", 195, which going into his sophomore year, you get a lot of these running backs that are, 5'9", 170, and you offer them early. And I keep going back to Jordan Houston from Virginia during the pandemic. They offered him. They were the first one to offer him. Never really got that much bigger. Good player, but never really got that much bigger. You got to be a certain size, speed, athletic combination to play here. Seems like he's already got the size down. You look in Western Pennsylvania, you got Tyke Hayes, of course, at Aliquippa. Kemon Spell at McKeesport is on that kind of track. So I'm excited to see how he progresses. This is one that sort of came on quickly. I mean, this is not a situation. So Penn State doesn't press sophomores for commitments. I know that it's been a thing. Alabama's gotten a few, Georgia's gotten a few. Some of the top programs nationally get a few just because of their draw and because of the way that you see that as a younger high school player and you want to play for the biggest programs. Well, Kemon Spell felt that way about Penn State. Of course, Penn State has done very well in Western Pennsylvania under Terry Smith. And just continues here. So I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to put together in the next couple of years. You talk to some people around Pittsburgh, and he's one of those guys that carries that next label. And you've got a couple of those guys right now in 2026. But I guess we're going with next with the class of 2027. Yeah. So Penn State on the board in 2027 with Kemon Spell. I think it's a really good start. I think they've done a nice job in terms of flipping the script. 2025 has been a long process. You follow that, especially in state, you follow it and you think that Penn State's kind of losing some of its mojo. Well, all of a sudden it goes out, gets Kevin Brown in 2026, gets Messiah Mickens in 2026, gets some of the other guys from out of state. Of course, Jahsir Rogers right across the border in Delaware in 2026. So sort of slowly turning that around. Then all of a sudden you hop on with the 2027. So I hesitate to give too much time to a guy that's that far in advance, but I think he's really good. And Penn State's running back recruiting has been pretty good. You kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. They've got 3 running back commits right now in 2025. You got Messiah Mickens in 2026, and now all of a sudden you've got Kemon Spell in 2027. Jaywan Sider lining it up.
Yeah, I made the joke, I want to say, when they got Keandre Barker a year and a half early, and then Tyke Hayes committed, or however long it was when they got Keandre Barker. And I said, well, that means that Jaywan Sider can start working on 26 and 27. I was kidding. He was not. Because here we are, 2027, they got to commit at running back. You just laid out perfectly how they have been doing this, and they have been getting these guys, especially at a position like running back where they have, it is, as you mentioned, some guys don't develop, and it is a very important position for physical development, especially at the college level. Do some of the changes in the recruiting rules, scholarship limits going away, transfer portal, does that allow Penn State to take more of these chances, even folding in the idea they have 6 commits in the class of 2026 already at this point? So is there a change in philosophy with how they're approaching some of these future commitments where they'd be a little more cautious previously?
That's a good question, because I think there's some of that in there. I look at, first of all, I look at 5 of the 6 guys in the class of 2026, and I think, okay, you've got guys, you take these guys no matter what. LeVar Keys was interesting to me, a little bit smaller guy. I think he's got potential, but looking at what Penn State has done at receiver recruiting and just recruiting in general, like you think that there's guys that, sometimes they kick that can down the road a little bit, although LeVar Keys did run a 4.3 at camp. So like, it's not a situation where he doesn't have those characteristics that you're looking for, but it does give you the ability to say, okay, this guy's on the line. If we drag our feet, they did this in 2025 with a couple of guys that probably shouldn't have happened that way, in terms of, like, you look at when they offered Andrew Olish, if they offer him in November, is he in the class? Maybe. But But then again, nobody else was coming after him at that point. Moot point here. But it gives you the flexibility to add numbers, and you're not up against it. We keep saying the 85 is kind of irrelevant now. Well, now it seems really irrelevant. Looking at that 105 list, how do you mix in bringing in traditional walk-ons? Because those guys are important for your program, but bringing in additional walk-ons, bringing in guys that you think might have the ability to blossom a couple of years down the road. It's a dynamic shift, but it's not a complete change. So I think that I think you're kind of trying to find something that isn't completely there, even though there's a shred of it there. So I think that's where I would go with it, especially with 2026. You've got those guys that have those dynamic characteristics. I mean, Brown, Hune, Mickens, you're going to take those guys every day of the week. Ja'Sir Rogers, Daniel Jennings, and LeVar Keys. You got to find what makes them special. And I think Rogers is probably moving toward that top group with the numbers that we've seen, with the tape that we. I don't know if you saw my Twitter yesterday posting the 7-on-7, him going up and getting it. I think that this is a kid that's eventually a 4-star player, but it gives you a little bit of wiggle room to find some elite characteristics that you think you can develop into elite players in the long run. So you guys like Jennings, guys like Keys in that mix.
Yeah, and you mentioned Ja'Sir Rogers. You had a chance to talk to Charles Power about him, and there was a question we probably won't get to today here from the mailbag at bluewhiteillustrated.com about the size of those receivers, and I just think it's interesting. You mentioned they're both a little bit undersized, elite speed, but what did Charles Power have to say about Ja'Sir Rogers in his first pass of taking a look at his sophomore film after he committed to Penn State?
So
sorry, go ahead.
No, you want to jump on the 4-3, and you want to say a speed guy. You want to say this guy, Amari Evans, for example. This guy is a guy that you can get down the field. But you want to look at his film, and I kind of said this about Kobe Howard, breaking down Kobe Howard's. You don't care about fly routes. If you're watching film, you don't care about fly routes because this guy
or kickoffs,
who is a Division I receiver. I mean, kickoff returns can show you balance. They can show you vision. They can show you a lot of things. But running a zero route down the field and beating a high school cornerback, it looks fantastic. It's great stats, whatever. But it's not going to get you any sort of evaluation here. So I think that you've got like different goggles if you're watching this film. Ja'Sir Rogers does it in the intermediate routes. He does it on the short routes. He takes the ball at the line of scrimmage. He weaves, he finds traffic, and he's playing Delaware competition, but you see this explosiveness at every level of the field. And that's really what you're looking for. And that's why, I mean, I don't go off of offer lists anymore. I'm stunned by his offer list that nobody took a look at that. And I think he's been discarded because he plays in Delaware, but nobody, and I'm in Delaware right now, by the way, I apologize for my audio. But nobody looked at that and just said, hey, we'll throw him something, hope he comes to camp, hope he does something. Well, Penn State got him in camp, and they were like, okay, this guy, he might be pretty good. So they find themselves with a guy that I think is a future 4-star receiver. We have him as an 89 and on 3. That'll continue to be evaluated. Don't forget, these guys are going into they were sophomores. They're going into their junior in high school. So long time left to evaluate for schools, for us on the recruiting services. And I think Ja'Sir Rogers early in the class, just it looks like a steal.
Any final thoughts here on Fitz's recruiting update? I think we're going to have a ride if Nate Bauer doesn't talk soon. So any last notes that you want to have before we get on to Penn State practice and what we saw this past weekend?
I don't know, man. I'm tempted to give him the ball and clear out the lane and let him go to town. I mean, he's my little Khalid El-Amin. So I'd love to see him take the ball here. But one final thing, working on a what's next in 2025. Of course, dead period right now in August. No visitors until essentially the home opener for Penn State. So you go with that. There were some visitors. We slid in at the end of last week. I think we talked about them on the show last week with Tyler Merrill. So I think that is where we're at with 25. I don't want to call it a dead zone, but kind of a dead zone in there. So, but check out our what's next in 2025 as I